somebody who knows Dan's show and our show very well, who I think deep down feels like he's cheating on Dan every single time he appears on the Rich Eisen Show. But that might just be a me thing. That's a YP, right? That's a your problem, not an MP.
Well, it's
What's
an MP.
an MP for me?
It's an MP for you.
Chris Mannix from the Bubble in Orlando, joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show from Sports Illustrated. How are you, Christopher?
I do, Rich, feel like I'm doing something unsavory every time I appear on the show. It does feel like infidelity in a way.
You know what, though, Chris? I feel like you and I have our own chemistry, or chemistry, as Dan might point out. And and I think it's fine. I think there's enough Mannix to go around. It really is, Chris. I really believe that.
I think so. We do have to find our true basketball connection, though. Like in the Bubble the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
Every time Ricky Rubio made a shot, I would take a picture of him and send it to Dan and just alert him that Ricky Rubio is the greatest point guard in the history of international basketball. I would flood his text messages with.
I understand that. You've been dying on that Rubio Hill for quite some time, Chris.
Oh, so long. So long that I don't even remember when it began, in fact.
So let's start with life in the Bubble. Are you there for the duration, Chris? Are you locked in there for the duration?
No, I've been here since July 12th. Wow. I'm planning on tapping out in early September. We have another writer from SI, Mike Rosenberg, that's going to come in and finish it. I really wanted to be here for when I'm here, like the beginning stages when all 22 teams were here, and some of the stories you can write off of that. I'll still cover it, but it's it's less, to me, it's less valuable as a reporter, as the teams get whittled down to 8 and 4.
Right. So what has life been like? Weird? How would you describe the Bubble experience for everybody? Because part of the conversation we're already hearing now that the rubber is meeting the road, elimination rounds have arrived. The conversation about teams that are comfortable in the Bubble as opposed to teams that are not, potentially the Lakers being one of those.
Yeah, I've found that players are starting to get into something of a bubble rhythm, for lack of a better phrase. They experimented with social activities early, whether it was fishing or golf, and golf is still played by a lot of guys out there every single day. But I think players have found some sense of rhythm with, hanging by the pool and hanging out with teammates. And you've seen stuff, on social media with, Madden tournaments that the Lakers are playing, and some other teams are doing similar things as well. I think the biggest thing, and we're seeing this in the first round already, is that teams that, like Philadelphia, that go down 0-2, ordinarily, the Sixers would have, the benefit of a home crowd, in a building they went 31-4 in the regular season, try to get that momentum back. They don't have that. So these teams that go down early, they find themselves without the boost that comes with playing in front of their home crowd. So the adjustment right now is more about what you're getting and really what you're not getting from these arenas on the floor. You're going to see some of these teams really react differently as the series progresses.
Well, let's start unpacking that a little bit. The Sixers, we were having a little bit of fun, but usually there's a germ of truth in every single joke. I'm not saying they are a joke, but we were just joshing around that this is the end of the process. The process is officially needing to be 2.0, 3.0, or just blown up with what's going on with the Sixers. What do you say?
Yeah, look, every conversation about Philadelphia has to be taken with the caveat that Ben Simmons isn't playing. And Simmons is one of the best point guards in the league, an all-star, an elite defensive player. So when you lose a player of that caliber, you lose a lot. And, they're replacing him in the lineup with Matisse Thybulle, who's a rookie. Shake Milton was in the G League last year. He's their starting point guard. There's a roster element to all this that has to be taken into account. But what is inexplainable, and I was at the game against Boston last night, the effort that was displayed was just inexcusable. They got up early, but when Joel Embiid went out and Boston picked up the tempo, they just folded. They just showed no energy in the second half of that game, no effort in the second half of that game. It's easy to beat up on Brett Brown, and ultimately, if they wind up getting swept or beaten 5 games, he's probably going to pay the price. But if you're a professional player, you've got to play with more energy than that. Like that was just the effort was just non-existent for Philadelphia in that game. So I'm not a believer that you have to break up the Simmons-Embiid core. These are great players that are still very much in their early to mid-20s. I think you just need to find the right chemistry around them. I mean, they started this year, Rich, without shooting. They let J.J. Redick walk, Jimmy Butler left, and they didn't replace them with any capable shooters. Like, if you have 2 players like Embiid and Simmons, the other 10 guys that are in your active roster need to be shooters, all of them. And if they're not, you're not doing those players any favors out there on the floor. So to me, this starts with Elton Brand in the front office, being better at putting the right talent around those 2 players.
That said, Chris, I mean, wasn't the conversation about the Sixers pre-COVID during the 70-game regular season that we saw prior to the stoppage all about that Simmons and Embiid were not mixing well on the floor at all and might not actually be the, obviously when you've got 2 superstar players, that's what you need in the NBA, and you can add a third. That's what puts you definitely over the top potentially. But if the 2 superstars don't complement each other, or they can't figure it out, or it can't be figured out, that's a problem. Wasn't that the conversation about the Sixers?
It was the conversation, but I do think you have to zoom out, if you will, and look at it in the bigger picture that the team they had last year was not brought back. And what happens, Rich, if that Kawhi Leonard baseline jumper takes 1 extra bounce and falls out, and the Sixers go on to win that game? Are we having an entirely different conversation? Does Philadelphia win the championship? Maybe. I mean, Toronto went on to win the whole thing. Would Philadelphia? I mean, is it really as simple as one bouncing ball changing the perception of this team? I think where Philadelphia made a huge mistake was not paying Jimmy Butler. Like, it would have been an expensive team, that's for sure, but Jimmy Butler has been brilliant for Miami this year. And the Sixers just didn't believe that in a 5-year contract, Jimmy Butler would be able to stay healthy enough and produce enough to live up to that money. That was a mistake. Butler on that team would have given them the shooting, the extra playmaking, and the gravitas they need to win, a series like they're in with Boston. That, I think this is less about Simmons and Embiid and far more about the kind of players that are being put around them.
Chris Mannix of SI, senior writer here on the Rich Eisen Show. We had your colleague from the LA Times, Tanya Ganguli, on the show yesterday. She's been covering the Lakers, as we all know, there in the bubble. Mentioning that the Lakers shooting woes in the bubble are just a matter of time till they fall. At least that's the way that Frank Vogel and the staff are taking a look at it. They're 1 game down now. We all know Charles on TNT is saying the sweep is coming. Are you concerned, or do you have the mindset of, okay, it's all set up, that just the shots just have to start falling?
I mean, you have to be concerned if for no other reason than they're up against what is arguably the greatest 8 seed in NBA history. I mean, the Blazers are not an 8 seed. They're a conference finalist masquerading as an 8 seed because of everything that happened pre-pandemic with the health of their roster. So you're not going up against, a group of stumble bums that are not going to be able to produce like they did in game 1. All that being said, Danny Green is a proven playoff shooter. Kyle Kuzma shot 44% from 3 during the restart. The looks the Lakers got in game 1 were great ones. And every time I talk to a coach or an executive in the hallways of these hotels out here, I ask them the question, like, are you worried about the Lakers? The Lakers' struggles, are they a concern to you? And more often than not, I'd say 90% of the time, the answer has been no. Because as these coaches point out, and it's similar to what you just said, all it takes is 1 practice or 1 meeting or 1 quarter even for them to get it right, for these shots to start to fall. And look, they were in this game against Portland to the bitter end, shooting 15% from 3. Like, that is an abomination of a number, and they were still in this game at the end. If they make 5% more of those shots, they probably win the game against Portland. I just look at the Lakers, and I think they'll make more threes in this next game. And if they do, they'll win the game and they'll win the series. I don't think Portland had a great defensive game. I think the Lakers just missed all their shots.
I mean, you mentioning that the Blazers are a conference finalist masquerading as an 8 seed. You got the Mavericks as a 7 seed, right? You've got, I mean, the Rockets right there in the middle of the pack. You see what the Jazz and the Nuggets are doing to each other. We all know the Clippers have George and obviously Kawhi and others. But this is anybody's tournament, right, in the West, wouldn't you say? Like any of the teams I just mentioned could do it, all of them, right?
In the West and the East, too. I mean, I wrote the start of all this on Monday that it was the most wide open a field has ever been. There is no favorite in all this. It just, because of everything that's happened, it's impossible to, have any kind of confidence in predicting even a finalist from either conference. The West, though, could get especially wild. I mean, if you're the Clippers, you're at practice today, saying to yourself, we are, one stupid Kristaps Porzingis technical foul away from being down 0-2. I mean, they were up 5 in that game 1. The Mavericks were before Porzingis went out, and Luka just got gassed down the stretch and couldn't hold on. The Mavericks are right there. I mean, they could have been up 2-0 in the series, and for a young team, you're giving them a lot of confidence going into this game 3. So you've got to be really anxious if you're the LA Clippers, and you've got to start making some adjustments out there, and you've got to hope that Montrezl Harrell gets his win back as we get into more of these games. You got to cross your fingers and hope Patrick Beverley can come back at some point, because defensively he is really key to what they do, especially against a guy like Luka Doncic. But you've got to be really anxious if you're the Clippers, given how those first 2 games have gone.
What about Westbrook? Are we going to see him soon or not at all? I mean, what's the scoop on him?
Not soon, from the people I talked to, within Houston. The concern in Houston is not the state of his injury right now, but the likelihood that if he comes back too soon, you get a more significant version of it. That's been kind of the message coming out of the Rockets. And look, they gave themselves a little bit of a cushion winning that game 1. It gave Mike D'Antoni and that team more reason to let them, sit Westbrook on the sideline. So he's going to miss game 2. And, if they win game 2, it wouldn't surprise me to see them try to stretch this out and just make sure that he's fully healthy when he comes back. I mean, the Thunder have been a great story all season long, but as you saw in that game 1, they just don't really have the firepower to match up with Houston in a series like this.
A few more minutes left with Chris Mannix at Sports Illustrated, senior writer, calling in from the Orlando bubble. Is the draft lottery happening in the bubble tonight? Walk me through this. What's going on with the draft lottery this evening, sir?
Yeah, the lottery is happening. It's kind of, it's unique circumstances, obviously, because it's all being done virtually. And, for the most part, for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been in that draft lottery room kind of observing, because it's kind of cool to see how the whole thing plays out. It'll be entirely different this time around. But, man, there are some high stakes in this draft lottery. I can tell you a lot of top executives out here are, kind of nervously watching, wondering if the Warriors wind up with that number 1 pick. The Warriors will have as much a chance as anyone. I mean, look, if you're Golden State, and look, to be clear, it's not a great draft. I mean, I don't know who's number 1, whether it's Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, LaMelo Ball is in that mix. But if you have the number 1 pick and a big contract you can move in an Andrew Wiggins, which the Warriors have, you might be able to get somebody big. And I don't know who's available right now, but somebody always comes on the market, whether it's circumstances for a team or something else. And if you're armed with a top pick and a big contract, you can get something that get a player that fits into the timetable that Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green are on. So the Warriors are kind of sitting back right now, being goofy on social media, but they're the elephant that's not in the room, so to speak. I mean, everybody's going to be watching that draft lottery night. I guarantee you, just cringing if the Warriors wind up with number 1.
Well, let's stir it up. Give me some names that you think the Warriors could add with a Wiggins dangle, as you say, because they've got the number 1 overall pick in their back pocket. It's just hard to say right now, right?
Because the teams I've talked to, like a lot of teams, are going into next season believing they're contenders, at least for a playoff spot. I mean, look at the Western Conference, Rich. Who's the worst team in the Western Conference next year? I mean, probably Minnesota, you'd say off the bat, but the Timberwolves will have, 2 All-Stars in Towns and Russell and a young group that gets better. Look up and down those standings. It's a fight 1 through 15. So I don't see a team outside of maybe San Antonio that could be looking to move off, a player, and you don't trade the top pick for LaMarcus Aldridge. So It's hard to sort of see the landscape right now, but as it always happens, a team changes direction in the offseason, maybe makes a coaching change, or a new GM decides that a player is not as valuable as the other previous regime thinks he was. So somebody's going to be out there, and the Warriors are going to be more armed than anybody else to go and get that player.
Okay, so is this? So how's it going to look tonight? Like the Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum in his basement on one Zoom, and then the ping pong balls on another Zoom, and then nervous executives on their own Zoom boxes. The Knicks will try to choose somebody from their past that actually can stand being in the same room as James Dolan to stand there and try and be lucky for them. That won't be lucky because Dolan's karma sucks. I've set this all up for you. Chris, is that what it's going to look like tonight, essentially? Did I lay it out?
Basically. I mean, it's everybody beaming in virtually. Each team will have their usual, kind of goofy representative, from that group, and it'll play out like that. But it's just going to be fascinating to see who winds up with those. I mean, the Knicks, I think they've got their eye on LaMelo Ball, and God, I mean, if LaMelo and LeVar wind up in New York, I mean, I don't know. I don't
Please
know how
let that happen.
My gosh.
Please.
Oh, my God. LeVar from Los Angeles, you're on the fan? Is that what you're saying? Like, that's the way it's going to look?
I mean, play it out a little bit further, Rich. I mean, you put LaMelo in New York, and you've got Tom Thibodeau there as well. The idea of LeVar Ball lobbing grenades at Tibbs from, section 115 of the Garden, once they get back in there, that's got to make I know it makes some Knicks executives extremely nervous. So it's that's a scenario that could be some interesting copy for the tabloids in New York.
I should say so. Chris, stay safe in the bubble. We'll chat again soon. I always appreciate our conversations. Thanks, brother.
Anytime, Rich.
You got it. It's Chris Mannix. You can follow him at SI Chris Mannix on Twitter. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.